My co-hosts here, Emily Campagno and Kaylee McEnany, are ready to carry you through a fun Friday. Here also, Tommy Lahren and Steve Hilton. Good to see you guys. Prosecutors say the suspects posed as Homeland Security agents and gave expensive gifts to Secret Service agents, including televisions, cell phones, weapons, rent-free apartments worth $40,000 a year each. 4 Secret Service officers have been put on administrative leave in connection with this case. Fox News can now confirm one of the agents was protecting the First Lady at the time. The other was assigned to the vicinity of the Vice President's residence, although not on her personal detail. We have new pictures of what the FBI has found after raiding one of the suspects' apartments this week. They show tactical gear, ammunition, and firearms. Both men are U.S. citizens, although one claims to have ties to Pakistan's intelligence service. The suspects are set to appear in court later this afternoon. Steve Hilton, what comes to mind when you see the details of this story?
Well, the details are really pretty shocking, Harris. And as you said, although when you said, the worst scandal in Secret Service history, I was thinking you were going to say the worst scandal since the last scandal, because actually this is a scandal-plagued agency. I'll get to that in a second, but the specific details of this case are really, really scary. With that connection there, potentially, to Pakistani intelligence, to the ISI, tells you that this is not just a bunch of random people who thought this would be a fun idea. This is infiltration by a foreign government, and actually a hostile part of a foreign government. Often we think of Pakistan as an ally. The ISI, the intelligence agency, that was a real enemy of America through the years in Afghanistan, funding and supporting the Taliban and so on, despite what we heard from the Pakistani government. So that's a real cause for concern. Secondly, in terms of the specifics of this case, you have to wonder, when you read out that list of specifics that the agents were offered, including the rent-free apartment, you have to wonder why they weren't suspicious. And that rings real alarm bells, frankly, about the quality of the people in these incredibly sensitive positions. But actually, the real point I think that we all need to focus on is the structural point about what is going on with this agency. I was just looking at what's happened since those scandals, particularly during the Obama years. And we all remember the stories, one after another. Intrusions into the White House, prostitutes in Colombia, on and on it went. There was a report done to make recommendations, an expert panel. I've got the details here. An expert panel recommended in 2014 a bunch of recommendations for the Secret Service. They pointed to a catastrophic failure of training and recommended training. The divisions trained 25% of the time. They had 19 recommendations. Now, if you look just recently, the Government Accountability Office looked at what the Secret Service had done. They said that now the training might get up to 12% of the time by 2025, and 13 of the 19 recommendations have been met. So what have they been doing? They're not even halfway to implementing the recommendations that were made after the last scandal.
Look, and this is not to impugn the entire agency, but what you're talking about really hit the entire agency. If they did 13 of the 19 recommendations, were those even the right recommendations? I mean, that's more than 50%. Maybe they were learning the wrong stuff. Tommy.
Yeah, one has to wonder, how does something like this happen? Where is the oversight? This isn't a small issue. We're talking about the president, the vice president, the first lady. This kind of thing should not fall through the cracks. But I look at the bigger picture here. The American people already have so much distrust in federal institutions. There's so many questions about foreign agencies, foreign ties, whether it be the Biden family, whether it be Eric Swalwell and his potential Chinese girlfriend spy, Dianne Feinstein. There are so many people with so many links to so many things that should be concerning. I think it's time we batten down the hatches and get some oversight here, because this is nothing to play with. The American people deserve answers on this and a whole cadre of other issues that are threatening our national security, and I don't think we're going to get it. It just seems to be swept under the rug, and no one seems to care about this investigation, the next investigation. We are so investigation-ridden, and it seems like we rarely ever get a conclusion that's satisfactory.
I know. You know, sometimes you kind of get confused when you say a word over and over and over and over and over, and you're like, wait, what does that word mean again? For me, that word is investigation. Emily.
Yeah, Tommy, you make a great point. And I have to say, you know, if there is a dearth of leadership an absence of training, if there are outlier agents, then we will reserve that identification for each. And largely, by and large, the Secret Service is filled with an incredible cadre of men and women in a largely thankless job, frankly. And we thank them and are grateful for them absolutely every single day. I spoke with a longtime supervisory special agent, Jeff James, of the Secret Service. He was presidential detail covering 4 administrations. He's now retired, and he had just such great insight into this situation. He said, you know, you're talking about all this stuff, to Steve's point, free rent and the like. These guys were supposed to be DHS employees. That's the same pay structure. So didn't that raise red flags? How are these guys in possession of all of this cash of amazing, expensive stuff? And then secondly, you know, we know that concentration-wise, Washington, D.C. and Moscow have the most heavily populated amount of spies in the entire world. Why would you be even talking to these people when they're giving you improper benefits? No matter what dearth of training there might be, training covers that. At best, he said they were being set up for extortion, and at worst, they were being worked as an asset for a foreign government. And that final point blew me away. And by the way, if they had just done a little bit of research, a little bit on their own, 3 minutes of their time into these guys, they could have saved the DOJ from undergoing an incredible now investigation that, to Tommy's point, will likely last a long time.
So that begs the question, why weren't they more curious about what was going on? And for me, you know, in terms of following investigations, there's that word again, I would want to know that primarily because of the vulnerability that it creates. You can bribe, you can do a whole lot of things with somebody who's taken that kind of cash. But also, if they're not that curious about their own well-being, how are they going to protect somebody?
Right. We have not heard their side of the story yet. I think it's worth saying, look, they should have asked those questions. When you're working in government, there are certain gift regulations. You know, for example, I got a box of masks at the height of the pandemic. I was only able to accept 2 because they had to be under a certain very small dollar threshold. So the notion you're receiving $40,000 for an apartment and flat screen TVs and iPhones, you should ask your superior, even though this individual said, oh, it's money caught up in an operation, you know, they were misled. However, you should raise that to your superior. I do want to say this to Emily's point. I think it's very important to separate kind of the rank and file from maybe some of the macro problems at Secret Service, just like we did the FBI agents, from some of the macro problems with corruption at the head of the FBI. These Secret Service individuals, I was around them when I was an intern for the Bush administration. I was around them every day as press secretary for Trump. Amazing people, smart people, protect the president of the United States in the hardest of situations. I couldn't even bring my husband's jersey that was framed into the White House without dog sniffing, rigorous questioning from Secret Service. They do a phenomenal job. These 4 individuals, I can't speak for their lack of judgment in this situation. I want to hear their side of the story, but I will say these are some of the best in Secret Service. I was honored to stand by them every day.
Yeah, and unfortunately, what we're left to focus on now is to wait for those details to come forth, to look at 4 people left on administrative leave and to wonder, well, what's the backfill on that? And you know, you heard, Steve, you gave such great points with that after all the scandals that we saw within the last decade, what types of things were there to kind of retrofit a better future on this agency? And I don't know, again, if those were the right things to do, if they're being followed the way that they should be followed. But this taints everybody until we learn more. Unfortunately, it shouldn't.
That's exactly right. And I think that exactly as Tommy said, you know, it does speak to a wider lack of trust in our federal agencies. You see, the bureaucracy is grown so much, it's so big, and the bigger it gets, the more money it gets from us taxpayers, it seems to be worse and worse in terms of performance, plus infected by this culture of political ideology instead of just getting on and doing the job in practical ways. So I think that is absolutely right. People will look at this and think, what is going on with our federal government?
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.